And Richard, working for him is like working for your best friend. We don't argue a whole lot, argue a little bit, but not a whole lot. But got a lot of great.
By the late 1990s, Dale Earnhardt had already defined an era. 7 championships. A black number 3 that meant something the moment it appeared in your mirror. He was not a driver who depended on approval. He measured himself by performance, not popularity. Earnhardt built his name on pressure. He crowded space. He tested patience. He forced competitors to decide whether they truly belonged in the moment. If a driver lifted early, he noticed. If a driver hesitated, he remembered. Respect in his world did not come from interviews or handshakes. It came from surviving the final 10 laps without blinking. He was not quick to praise. In fact, he rarely did. Earnhardt believed that too much talk weakened the garage. If you wanted acknowledgement from him, you earned it through awareness, toughness, and control under strain. You had to handle the draft at Daytona. You had to hold your line at Bristol. You had to absorb contact without turning emotional. Years later, when asked about the drivers who truly stood out to him, Earnhardt did not talk about fame. He talked about composure. He talked about intelligence behind the wheel. He talked about men who did not flinch when he applied pressure. There were 5 drivers who met that standard. 5 competitors who never folded when the Black 3 closed in. 5 men who forced him to elevate his own craft. These were not friendships. These were standards. Number 5. Rusty Wallace. Rusty Wallace earned Dale Earnhardt's respect the hard way. He did not arrive with a reputation built on intimidation. He arrived with discipline. By the late 1980s, Wallace had already shown that he was more than a contender. He was consistent, controlled, and capable of managing a full championship season. In 1989, Wallace won the Cup Series title. That mattered to Earnhardt. Championships separated serious drivers from temporary threats. Wallace proved he could handle pressure over months, not just in one dramatic afternoon. Earnhardt valued that kind of endurance. Their racing was never soft. Wallace did not surrender position easily, especially on short tracks where space disappeared quickly. When Earnhardt applied pressure entering a corner, Wallace held his line. He did not overreact. He did not drift out of the groove to avoid contact. He absorbed it and continued racing. On superspeedways, Wallace showed a different strength. He understood drafting strategy. He knew when to stay patient and when to commit. Earnhardt noticed drivers who could think ahead in traffic. Wallace was rarely caught out of position because he anticipated movement before it developed. There were moments when their rivalry intensified, hard finishes, close calls, occasional tension in post-race interviews. But Wallace never framed the competition as personal. He treated it as professional. Earnhardt respected that mindset. He respected drivers who kept emotion under control while still racing aggressively. Wallace once admitted that competing against Earnhardt required full concentration every lap. Earnhardt understood the same about Wallace. You could not relax around him. You could not assume he would make mistakes under pressure. What separated Wallace was composure. He did not chase headlines. He chased execution. Earnhardt recognized that quality immediately. In a garage filled with personalities, Wallace relied on structure. He did not fear the Black 3. He challenged it. Rusty Wallace forced Earnhardt to stay sharp, and that is why he earned his place among the 5. Number 4. Darrell Waltrip. Darrell Waltrip represented a different kind of strength. Before Dale Earnhardt fully took control of the 1980s, Waltrip had already built a championship resume. He was confident, vocal, and strategically sharp. Where Earnhardt imposed pressure physically, Waltrip often applied it mentally. Their rivalry began in an era when NASCAR was shifting. Waltrip was already established. Earnhardt was rising quickly. That overlap created friction, but it also created awareness. Earnhardt studied drivers who understood how to manage a full season. Waltrip was one of them. Waltrip won 3 Cup championships. He knew how to protect equipment. He knew when to take points instead of risks. He understood long-term positioning in the standings. Earnhardt appreciated that level of race intelligence. It was not flashy. It was disciplined. On track, their battles were calculated. Waltrip did not rely on raw aggression. He relied on timing. At short tracks, he protected the bottom line carefully. On intermediate tracks, he positioned himself early to control restarts. Earnhardt respected drivers who controlled pace rather than reacting to chaos. There were years when they competed directly for momentum in the sport. Their personalities were different, and that difference often showed in interviews. But behind the surface tension, there was recognition. Waltrip was not intimidated by Earnhardt's presence. He maintained his own identity in the garage. Earnhardt later acknowledged that Waltrip forced him to expand his approach. Competing against Waltrip required more than toughness. It required patience and awareness across a long run. Waltrip rarely made emotional mistakes. He waited for opportunities and executed them cleanly. That kind of composure earned something rare from Dale Earnhardt: respect. Waltrip represented the standard Earnhardt had to surpass. And even after the balance of power shifted, Earnhardt never dismissed what Waltrip had built. Darrell Waltrip stood firm during NASCAR's most competitive transition period. He never faded quietly. That mattered. Number 3. Cale Yarborough. Cale Yarborough represented something deeper than rivalry. He represented continuity. When Dale Earnhardt entered NASCAR's highest level, Yarborough had already defined toughness in the previous era. 3 consecutive championships in the 1970s. Aggressive, direct, and unyielding. Earnhardt paid attention to drivers who carried authority without speaking loudly. Yarborough did exactly that. He did not rely on showmanship. He relied on control. On superspeedways, he understood airflow before many drivers did. On short tracks, he protected his line with calculated force. Their time overlapping on track was not built on constant headlines. It was built on mutual recognition. Earnhardt respected drivers who did not surrender under pressure. Yarborough was known for holding his position even when racing grew physical. That trait aligned with Earnhardt's own philosophy. Yarborough once stated that racing at the highest level required accepting contact as part of the job. Earnhardt agreed with that outlook. Neither man expected space to be given freely. They expected drivers to earn it. In Daytona and Talladega traffic, Yarborough demonstrated patience in drafting. He did not panic when boxed in. He waited for gaps to form naturally. Earnhardt valued drivers who understood timing rather than forcing moves prematurely. Yarborough rarely rushed decisions. More importantly, Yarborough carried himself with steadiness. He did not chase attention. He focused on execution. Earnhardt admired drivers who remained composed during long green flag runs when tire management and fuel strategy became decisive. There was no need for dramatic exchanges between them. The respect existed quietly. Yarborough represented a blueprint of toughness that Earnhardt both recognized and continued in his own era. He was not simply another competitor. He was a measuring point. Cale Yarborough demonstrated that aggression and discipline could exist together. Earnhardt saw that clearly. That recognition endured. Number 2. Bill Elliott. Bill Elliott brought a different kind of authority to the track. Where Dale Earnhardt relied on psychological pressure and physical positioning, Elliott relied on precision and speed. Especially on superspeedways, Elliott was not just competitive, he was dominant. In the mid-1980s, Elliott became a defining force at Daytona and Talladega. His understanding of airflow and engine performance allowed him to stretch gaps in ways few drivers could. Earnhardt respected speed when it was backed by intelligence. Elliott never depended on raw horsepower alone. He knew how to manage momentum. Their encounters at Daytona were often strategic battles rather than emotional clashes. Elliott would hold his line with confidence, trusting his car and timing. Earnhardt understood that he could not simply intimidate Elliott into making mistakes. Elliott did not overdrive corners when pressured. He remained composed. In 1985, Elliott completed what became known as the Winston Million, winning 3 of the sport's most prestigious races. That achievement did not go unnoticed. Earnhardt valued drivers who could perform under national attention without losing focus. Elliott handled that spotlight calmly. Unlike some competitors, Elliott did not respond to contact with visible frustration. He assessed situations carefully. If positioning required patience, he waited. If it required commitment, he executed cleanly. Earnhardt respected drivers who understood that balance. Their rivalry was built more on performance than personality. Elliott was not loud in interviews. He did not seek confrontation. He allowed results to speak. Earnhardt recognized that quiet confidence. There were moments in traffic where Earnhardt tested him. Elliott rarely flinched. He maintained control, especially in draft-dependent races where a single miscalculation could end the day. That steadiness commanded attention. Earnhardt admired drivers who could beat him without theatrics. Elliott was capable of doing exactly that. Bill Elliott forced Earnhardt to respect speed paired with discipline. That combination left a lasting impression. Number 1. Richard Petty. Richard Petty was not just another competitor in Dale Earnhardt's career. He was the benchmark. Long before Earnhardt's black number 3 defined intimidation, Petty's number 43 defined NASCAR itself. 200 career victories. 7 championships. A presence that shaped the sport's foundation. When Earnhardt entered the Cup Series, Petty was already a living standard. You did not race Richard Petty casually. You measured yourself against him. Earnhardt understood that immediately. Petty represented durability, professionalism, and long-term dominance. Their overlap on track symbolized a generational shift. Petty had built his success through smooth consistency and mechanical awareness. Earnhardt built his through intensity and control. Yet beneath those stylistic differences was a shared understanding of what NASCAR demanded. Petty rarely raced emotionally. He calculated risk. He preserved equipment. He protected his team's long-term stability. Earnhardt respected that strategic depth. Championships were not accidental in Petty's case. They were constructed over seasons of discipline. When Earnhardt tied Petty's 7 championship record in 1994, it was more than a statistic. It was acknowledgement of legacy. Earnhardt did not treat Petty as someone to surpass and forget. He treated him as the foundation that proved greatness could be sustained. Petty, in turn, recognized Earnhardt's contribution to NASCAR's next era. The respect between them was never loud. It did not need to be. It existed in posture, in interviews, in how they spoke about the sport. Earnhardt respected drivers who elevated NASCAR beyond individual rivalries. Petty had done that for decades. He carried the sport through transitions, rule changes, and cultural shifts without compromising professionalism. Richard Petty was not just respected for victories. He was respected for endurance. For Earnhardt, that mattered more than anything. He was the standard before him. Jeff Gordon represented change. When he entered NASCAR's top level in the early 1990s, he did not resemble the traditional image of a Cup Series driver. He was young, polished, and media-ready. Many veterans questioned whether he could handle the physical and psychological demands of the garage. Dale Earnhardt watched carefully. At first, their battles were framed as a clash between eras. Earnhardt embodied the rugged Southern identity of the sport. Gordon symbolized expansion into new markets and a broader national audience. But on the track, labels disappeared quickly. Gordon proved he could race under pressure. He did not hesitate when Earnhardt filled his mirror. He held his line at Bristol. He committed to moves at Darlington. He showed awareness in draft-heavy environments where mistakes were punished instantly. By the mid-1990s, Gordon was winning championships. He was not just fast, he was disciplined. He studied race data. He worked closely with his crew chief. He executed strategy cleanly. Earnhardt respected drivers who combined talent with preparation. Gordon did both. Their rivalry produced defining moments. Close finishes, hard-fought restarts, strategic positioning battles that tested patience rather than aggression alone. Earnhardt realized that Gordon was not intimidated by reputation. He was focused on execution. What stood out most was Gordon's composure. Even under scrutiny, he rarely lost control publicly. Earnhardt valued emotional steadiness. In a garage full of intensity, Gordon maintained structure. Over time, Earnhardt openly acknowledged Gordon's impact on NASCAR. He recognized that Gordon brought new audiences without sacrificing competitiveness. That balance impressed him. Jeff Gordon was not simply a rival. He was proof that the sport could evolve while maintaining its core demands. He respected him for changing the sport. Dale Earnhardt built his career on pressure. He built it on testing limits, shrinking space, and forcing decisions in the final laps. Many drivers raced against him. Fewer earned his acknowledgement. Respect in Earnhardt's world was never casual. It was not exchanged through compliments in the garage. It was proven through consistency, composure, and the ability to respond when challenged. The 5 names he ultimately recognized shared one thing: they did not retreat when the stakes rose. Rusty Wallace brought discipline over a full season. Darrell Waltrip represented intelligence during NASCAR's transition years. Cale Yarborough embodied toughness from a previous era. Bill Elliott demonstrated precision and speed under national spotlight. Richard Petty stood as the foundation of long-term greatness. Jeff Gordon proved that evolution could strengthen the sport rather than weaken it. Earnhardt respected drivers who demanded more from him, drivers who forced him to adjust, to refine, to elevate. They were not rivals defined by anger. They were competitors defined by standards. In the end, those standards shaped his own legacy. Competition built tension. Tension built growth. Growth built greatness. In NASCAR, respect is earned one lap at a time.